Well, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure, a great gift to be back here again and see some familiar faces and a lot of new faces. And so I would like to thank all of you. I would like to thank the community for inviting me back today. So I was wondering what to talk about today. I looked at the theme for the month. Your theme for April is selfless action and service. And as I was scratching my head, wondering what I might have to say about that, I'm not very good at selfless action and service. My spirit helpers, Hermes, who's one that I work with a lot, God of communication, said to me, "You're overthinking this. Just tell some stories." So I'm going to tell some stories. Once upon a time, in the country of Styria, which is now a province in Austria, in the country of Styria, there was an almost magical valley. It was so fertile and so rich that people called it the Treasure Valley. And it was high up in the Austrian Alps there. Now, the Treasure Valley was owned by two brothers. Their names were Schwartz and Hans. And unfortunately, Schwartz and Hans were not worthy of this great gift that had been given to them, the Treasure Valley. And they worked the land in such a way that they destroyed all the fertility, and they exploited and abused the other people that that lived in the valley, worked for them. And so Treasure Valley lost its treasure and actually became a very dead place. Now, Hans and Schwartz had a much younger brother. His name was Gluck. Gluck means luck, good luck in German. So you can already get an idea of where this might be going. And Gluck was the exact opposite of his older brothers. And it was in his nature just to always be kind and to meet whoever he encountered with goodwill and to try to be helpful. And to make this story short, because I have other stories to tell, one day, the southwest wind came to the valley, and the two older brothers weren't home. And he was seeking a dry fire. The southwest wind is a pretty soggy wind, and he wanted a place to get warm and dry. And Gluck let him in to the farmhouse, and he was warming himself by the fire. When the two older brothers came in, they threw the south wind out. The southwest wind. Later, he came back with essentially a hurricane, a great storm, and destroyed everything in the valley. It was the last straw. So, the brothers had to leave the valley. They couldn't be farmers anymore. They had to go to the town. they decided to become goldsmiths. And they had a lot of gold. They had a lot of gold goblets. They had a lot of gold plates. They had a lot of gold utensils that they could melt down. And they figured they will melt this gold down and we'll stir copper into it. People won't be able to tell. So we'll give them cheapened gold. So that's how they were making their living. Finally, they had melted all their gold down. There was only one golden goblet left, and it belonged to Gluck. But the brothers threw it in to the smelting pot anyway. And they left and said to Gluck, "You watch this, you take care of it." And so, as Gluck watched his golden mug dissolve, he saw that there were two eyes staring up at him out of the molten gold, and a little nose and a little mouth. And the mug had been in the shape of a little man. And so as the mug dissolved, all that was left of the shape of it was this little man's face. And finally, it was all dissolved. And when Gluck poured out the molten gold into what would have been the mold to make it an ingot, a bar, what happened instead was this little golden man popped out. And he said, "Thank you, Gluck, for freeing me. I am the king of the Golden River." The Golden River was a river that flowed from high up in the mountains down into Treasure Valley. I am the king of the Golden River, and you have freed me. I was enslaved in that mug by a stronger king, but you have freed me. And as a gift, I'm going to tell you a great secret, that anyone who takes 3 drops of holy water and travels up to the source of the Golden River and tosses that holy water into the river, for him, the Golden River will turn to gold, and they'll become a rich man. And then the little man disappeared. Well, Gluck shared this with his brothers, this information. And they, at first, didn't believe him, but then they decided that they might as well check it out. And they got into a fight, the 2 brothers, about which one was going to go up to the source of the Golden River and throw in the holy water. And they created such a ruckus that the neighbors had to call the constable, had to call the police. And when the constable came, they carted Schwartz, one of the brothers, off to jail. But the second brother, Hans, was able to hide. And so he didn't get carted off to jail. So he thought, now it's all going to be mine. And so the only problem was he didn't have any holy water. And he went to the church and asked the priest for some holy water. The priest wouldn't give him any holy water. Like, look at you, look at your life. You know, you drink, you're rowdy, you cheat people, you're mean to people. I'm not going to give you any holy water. So what did Schwartz do? What do you think he did, being the kind of person he was? He stole it. He stole it. He swiped the holy water. Ha-ha, I've got it. And he put his holy water, in a flask, and he got some bread and cheese in a basket, and he began to set up the mountain track. But along the mountain track, he encountered a glacier that he'd never seen before. And it was one tough glacier. It was big, it was slippery, it was cold, there were crevasses everywhere, and it was very hard to negotiate. And by the time he got across the glacier, He had lost his coat. He had lost his basket of food, the bread and cheese. And really, all he had lost his walking stick. All he had was that flask of holy water that he'd stolen. Now, this is something that I forgot to tell you. There's a catch to this. There's a catch to this, which the little golden king had told Gluck, and Gluck had shared this with his brothers. If when you chuck that holy water into the river, your heart is not pure, the river will overwhelm you and you will be turned into a black stone. And you only get one chance. Okay? One chance. So you can guess where this is going too. So Hans had negotiated the glacier, but it had really worn him out, and he was really, really thirsty. But he had this water, he had this flask of holy water. And he thought, well, I only need 3 drops. So I can sip a little of the holy water. And just as he was about to sip the holy water, he heard down at his feet, he heard a kind of and he saw a dog. And he saw a dog there, mangy, old, weak. See his ribs, his tongue hanging out. He's obviously dying and obviously thirsty. Hans says, that dog's just going to die anyway. I'm the one that's thirsty. And he took a couple of swigs from that flask and moved on and left the dog behind. As soon as he did this, he noticed that the air had gotten a little more chilly than it was, and that, there seemed to be a shadow over the sun. Funny thing, that. But he continued on. He had a ways to go. And he got closer and closer to the place in the mountains where there was the spring that was the source of the Golden River. And he went a little further and he began to feel thirsty again. And he thought, well, I've still got some water here. I'll take another little sip. And he hears, "Help me, sir, please. Help me." And he looked down, and there was a child. Again, very thirsty. "Sir, I'm so thirsty. Can I have a drink, please?" "Don't be silly. I've got important business to get to. I need this water." And off he went and left the child behind. Took a little more of the water for himself. Funny thing. Sky got a little bit darker. The wind got a little bit harsher. Finally, he was in sight of the source of the river. And he said, well, I only need 3 drops. This is hard work. And, but I'm almost there. I'll just take a little bit more and then everything will be right. He was about to take one more sip, and he had, "Oh, kind sir, please, just a little water." And he looked down and there was a man. There was a man on the ground, an old man. And again, he was dying of thirst. Please, just wet my tongue before I go." You can guess that Hans refused. And he drank all the water for himself, except for the 3 drops that he needed. And at last, he got to the source of the river. And by that time, the weather was not good. The weather was not good. The wind was howling. There was lightning. There was thunder, snow, and sleet. But Hans, he took that flask of water and he chucked it into the river. And as he did that, he felt his blood turn cold. He felt his blood in his veins stop, and the river rose up. And when the clouds parted and the sun finally came out, there in the river was one black stone. Gluck was very concerned back down in the village when his brother didn't come home, because in spite of all the abuse and in spite of all the ill treatment, Gluck cared about his brothers. And he was also concerned about his second brother, Schwartz, whom the last time we encountered him, if you remember, had been carted off to jail. He was still in jail. He didn't have any money left to be bailed out. Gluck had to go to work. He went to work for another goldsmith to earn the money to bail Schwartz out. At last, he had enough money to do that, and as soon as Schwartz got out of jail, he said to himself, I'm going to go. We know what happened to Hans. I'm going to go up to that river, and I'm going to claim the Golden River for myself. He did things a little differently. Gluck said, no, please don't. Just go find Hans. See that Hans is okay. But don't try to do this. Don't try to do this. Schwartz wouldn't listen to him. The story says that Schwartz did not steal the holy water, but he went to a bad priest. I don't know what that means. I'm assuming that it means a priest who himself did not have any conscience and would sell holy water to anybody to, just for little money. But so Schwartz bought his holy water from a bad priest and set up to the mountain and had similar experiences. He crossed the glacier. It was tough. He lost his food, he lost his bread, he lost his cheese, he lost his cloak, he lost his staff, got to the other side of the glacier, was feeling thirsty, just about ready to take a drink. And he hears the old man that we encountered before saying, please, sir, may I have a drink? Schwartz ignores him, takes his own drink, and moves on. And a little while later, he's feeling thirsty again, and he encounters the child. Please, sir, I'm so thirsty. Please, do you have anything in your flask? Schwartz ignores him or her and moves on. And here the story's a little bit different. He finally gets to the very end of the trail. And he can see the spring from where the Golden River begins. And he's feeling that thirst, and he's going, okay, I have enough left. I'll have just a little sip, and then I'll still have enough left. And he hears a moan. Oh. And he looks down, and it's his brother Hans, his very own brother, who is saying, that's who he thinks it is anyway. He said, water. And he says to Hans, you had your chance. And he continues on up to the spring. All the time, the weather is getting worse and worse. And finally, he gets to that spring. He has the flask of water. and he chucks it in, those 3 drops, and you can imagine what happens. When the sky clears, when the sun comes out, there in the river are, you can say it with me, 2 black stones. Yeah. Meanwhile, back down in the town, Gluck is wondering what's happened to his 2 brothers. And finally, he decides that he is going to go and look for them. And he is going to go and make that pilgrimage to the source of the Golden River. And he goes to the priest, and the priest gives him the holy water because he recognizes the goodness in Gluck's soul and Gluck's heart. And Gluck begins to travel up to the mountain. He comes to the glacier. Same thing. It's slippery, it's cold, it's treacherous. By the time he gets across, he has nothing left except the clothes on his back and that flask of holy water. Then he thinks, well, I wonder if I could drink any of this. And just when he's about to take a drink, he hears, "Oh, young man, I'm so thirsty. Might I have a drink?" And he looks, and there's an old guy there. And he says, "Well, of course you may, sir. Here, take some." And the old man takes the flask, and he drinks about 2/3 of it. So there really isn't very much left. Old man thanks him. Gluck continues up the path. And a little further up, he meets that young child. And the young child, again, is pleading for water. And he says, "Well, of course, here you go. Oh, you look so thirsty." And the child takes some, drinks that water, and then there's only a few drops left. Finally, Gluck gets all the way up to the top. He's almost ready. He says, "Oh, at least I have a little bit left that I can toss into the river." And he hears that dog. And the dog is there like, And Gluck goes, "Oh, you poor dog. Here, this is all I've got left, but you take it." And so the dog reaches out his tongue. He drank the last few drops of the holy water. And when he did that, his tail began to wag, and he began to jump up and spring up. And then the strangest thing happened. He turned into that little golden dwarf who says, "Gluck, you did it! You did it!" And Gluck says, "But I'm all out of holy water." And the king of the Golden River says, "Never mind that. Here," and he takes a lily that has dew on its leaves, and he shakes 3 drops of dew into Gluck's flask. And he says something along the lines of, holy water, no matter how it's been blessed or who it's been blessed, if it's not used in a holy way, is not holy. And any water, if it's used in a sacred way, becomes holy. Here's your holy water. And so Gluck tosses the flask into the river. And suddenly the river just begins to shine and sparkle and glitter. And he hears this strangest rumbling. And he hears it working underground. And what it does is it has worked its way underground. and then reemerges farther down the valley into what used to be Treasure Valley, which belongs to Gluck, still his own. And of course, the fertility of Treasure Valley is restored. And Gluck becomes the king of that valley and becomes a very wealthy man. And it is said that he never turned away anyone who was needy from his door. Now, when I think about this story, and what you heard me tell is a paraphrase of a literary tale called The King of the Golden River by a man named John Ruskin. Gluck is a model in this story of selfless giving, turning the other cheek, and indeed unconditional love. While he fears his brother's abuse, he does not seem to resent them. When I was reading this, I am telling myself, well, this is just a story. He goes to work for another goldsmith to earn money to secure Schwartz's release from jail. And when Schwartz and Hans don't come back from their quest, he goes out to discover their fates, and he truly expresses sorrow at their transformation when he sees what's happened to them. His virtue in all of this is almost superhuman. And throughout the story, he responds to the needs and the pain of others, no matter who they are. And I've left a lot of stuff out. With concern and compassion. And he ministers to them in ways that are appropriate to the situation and with the resources at hand. And if I were to look for myself in this story, I fear that I would not be Gluck. His are large shoes to fill. I want to think that I am not so bad or so selfish as Hans or Schwartz. But then I point out to myself how often I have passed a homeless person asking for help along the highway. And I find myself saying to myself, I am too busy to stop. I have to get to where I am going. I am here in my car, and they are out there, so we are not really in each other's fields. I don't have any small bills in my wallet. I've already given something else to someone else elsewhere, probably at the office. I can only give so much. These people are strangers, and so I choose not to acknowledge their need or even their humanity. I can find, and I do find, myriad reasons not to take compassionate action. And some of these reasons are quite compelling. But no matter how compelling I might find these reasons, or we might find them, since I don't believe I'm the only person who encounters this kind of dilemma. We do not embody those reasons. We do not acquiesce to those reasons without cost. When we pass a suffering being on the roadside without acknowledgement, without action, it may be that a little piece of our hearts turn to a black stone. And if our hearts turn too much to stone, we can find ourselves impotent, even if a generous impulse should arise within us. I'd like to read to you a story from the Bible. Many of you may know it. It's from Luke. It's from the New Testament. There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen and lived in luxury every day. At his gate was laid a beggar named Lazarus, covered with sores, and even longing to eat what fell from the rich man's table, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The time came when the beggar died, and the angels carried him to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. In hell, where he was in torment, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. And so he called to him, "Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire." But Abraham replied, "Son, remember that in your lifetime you received good things, while Lazarus received bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. And besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm has been set in place, so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over there to us, from there to us." And the man answered, "Then I beg you, Father." This is interesting because here's a little generous impulse, you see. The man answered, "Then I beg you, Father, send Lazarus to my family, for I have 5 brothers. Let him warn them so that they will not also come to this place of torment. It's too late for me, but help other people save themselves." Abraham replied, "They have Moses and the prophets. Let them listen to them." "Oh, no, Father Abraham," he said, "but if someone from the dead goes to them, they will repent." And Abraham said to him, "If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, they will not be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead." In the case of Moses and the prophets, in this case, Moses and the prophets are presumably those places in the Old Testament that counsel compassion and generosity towards those in need. It occurs to me on this Easter Sunday that if one's heart is already stony, if one's heart is not already quickened by compassion of some kind, even Jesus, let alone Lazarus, may not be able to reach it. God may send us his angels with the gift of grace, and it may do no good. Here's a story from The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky. Once upon a time, there was a peasant woman, and a very wicked woman she was. And she died and did not leave a single good deed behind. The devils caught her and plunged her into a lake of fire. So her guardian angel, I love this, that even this wicked woman has a guardian angel. Think about that. So her guardian angel stood and wondered what good deed of hers he could remember to tell God. "Well, she once pulled up an onion in her garden," said he, "and gave it to a beggar woman." And God answered, "Will you take that onion then, and hold it to her in the lake of fire, and let her take hold and be pulled out? And if you can pull her out of the lake, let her come to paradise. But if the onion breaks, then the woman must stay where she is." And the angel ran to the woman and held out the onion to her. "Come," said he, "catch hold and I'll pull you out." And he had just pulled her right out. She grabbed onto it, she just pulled her right out. And as he began to do that, cautiously, all the other sinners in the lake of tar and the lake of fire, they were seeing how she was being drawn out, and they began to catch hold of her so they would be pulled out with her. And in some versions of this story, every single inhabitant of hell is beginning to be drawn out of hell by this one act of grace, the woman holding on to the onion. But she was a very wicked woman. That's the version I have. I think she was a very frightened woman. Those two things can be kind of similar. But she was a very wicked woman, and she began kicking at them, all the other people. I'm to be pulled out, not you. It's my onion, not yours. And as soon as she said that, the onion broke, and the woman fell back into the lake, as did everyone else. And she is burning there to this day. So the angel wept and went away. Now, I realize that all these cautionary tales are kind of depressing. You hear enough of these stories, and sometimes people don't come to church anymore to hear these kinds of stories. Don't give me no bad news. The witch says that in The Wiz. Doesn't she say that? Those of you that might know musicals, there's a song that the Wicked Witch sings about, don't give me any bad news. You hear enough of these stories, and it may seem like there is no way to get out of hell. And indeed, the stories want you to believe that because it's the intention of them. They're cautionary tales. It's the intention of these stories to get you to shape up. You want to get to heaven? Well, don't act like Hans or Schwartz or the oblivious rich man or the greedy, frightened, selfish, wicked onion woman. Instead, be like Gluck, or be like that tender guardian angel who cared for that soul, that wicked soul, and wept for the soul of the onion woman, grieved for her, even after she had fallen back into the flames. Or be like the citizens of heaven in this next story. A man once had a dream, and he dreamt that he had died and found himself at the gates of heaven. This was a great relief to him, as he had tried to lead a good life, but he had never been sure that he had led a good enough life. And indeed, just as he was about to step in through the gates into paradise, out of self-doubt or perhaps out of shyness, he hesitated. And the gatekeeper noticed his trepidation. "What's the matter?" he asked. "You don't like it? Would you rather be somewhere else?" "You mean I have a choice?" the man asked, surprised. The gatekeeper shrugged, and motioning to the man, he said, "Come with me." And the gatekeeper waved his arms, and presto, they found themselves at the gate of hell. To the man's surprise, they were identical to the gates of heaven, to the entrance of heaven. And now he could smell all sorts of delicious smells wafting from the other side of the gates. He could hear the din of cutlery. The gatekeeper led him through the gates, and they found themselves in an enormous banquet hall, so wide and so long that there were no walls to be seen. Somewhere there was an orchestra playing. Chandeliers hanging from an invisible ceiling cast a warm glow over the banquet tables and the diners, who were far too numerous to count. The most beautiful, ethereal music wafted in from all corners, and the smell of all that food was so mouth-watering he could nearly taste it. "This is hell?" the man gasped. "No place else," the gatekeeper replied. "Oh, it's not what it seems. Take a closer look." The man did so, and examining the tables more closely, he noticed something disturbing. All the tableware, each fork and spoon, was actually lashed to the hands and the arms of the diners. And each utensil was so long that it was impossible for them to get the food into their mouths. They couldn't get it into their mouths. With dawning horror, he realized that everyone was starving. They were surrounded by a feast for kings and unable to get any of it into their mouths, only growing hungrier by the day, yet continuing to toil helplessly. He could hear their moans and cries now, feel the desperation and hopelessness of the situation as it continued into infinity. And he shivered and he said, "Oh, I've seen enough of this. Please take me away from here." "Back we go," said the gatekeeper, and he waved his arms once more, and then he said, "Well, here we are, home again." But to the man, it seemed as if they hadn't moved. They still seemed to be in hell's. They still seemed to be in hell's infinite banquet hall. Everything seemed to be the same. The food, the smells, the music, and worst of all, the long spoons and forks tied to the arms of every diner. "Isn't heaven a hoot?" chuckled the gatekeeper. "But this isn't heaven," cried the man. "It's still hell." "You think?" said the gatekeeper, and he gestured to the man to look more closely. And when the man did, he noticed the mood of the diners was in complete contrast to those in hell. An atmosphere of love and camaraderie and delight permeated the entire hall. And he saw that even though they could not feed themselves, these diners were partaking of every aspect of the feast. And how? They were feeding one another. Some of you I know have probably heard this story before. I'm reminded by this, by the first time I went to an Ethiopian restaurant, when they first opened here in the Twin Cities. And I had a meal that was served on the flatbread that they have. If you've been to an Ethiopian restaurant, it's called, I think it's called injera or inhira or whatever. And it was explained to me at that time by one of the servers that in Ethiopia, what you do is you're sitting around this flatbread. All the food is on the flatbread, which is like a platter, and you feed each other. Oh, look, that piece of meat looks really good. You take that one. Oh, I know that you love hard-boiled egg. Why don't you have that one there? We don't do that here. And you want to practice selfless action and compassion, service? Start small. Have a meal at home and practice feeding each other. Oh, this little bit looks good. I know you'd like that. Here. You don't even have to do anything. Sometimes it's a state of mind. One of my favorite stories and myths, which I'm not going to really tell here, is the story of Parsifal, who is a young knight in King Arthur's Round Table. And he sets off on a quest to the Holy Grail, and he's a total innocent. This is really beyond his kin. And he gets to the Grail Castle. The Grail is within his reach. But just as he's about to see the Holy Grail, the Fisher King, the king of the Grail Castle, is carried in on a litter, and he's got this terrible, stinky wound that cannot be healed. He's had it forever. And Parsifal is so blown away by this that he doesn't say anything. He's afraid he'll be stupid. He doesn't know what to say. He's not even sure he should be here. And he says nothing, and the king passes by. And when that happens, Parsifal is immediately thrown out of the Grail Castle. And it takes him 20 years to find his way back. 20 years of life that has happened to him in many adventures. So fast forward 20 years later, he is now an old man, an aging man for that time. And he finds himself in the Grail Castle. The king is still there, still has that stinky wound. And this time, Parsifal says, without thinking of himself, will I be stupid? Will I say the right thing? I don't know what to say. He simply says, What ails thee? What's the matter? And when he asks that question, when he sees the other as a sacred being, without concern for himself. It's not that he doesn't have an ego or an identity, but in that moment, he's able to say, what's the matter? That is where the selfless action and service happens. And in that story, at that moment, the king is healed. Parsifal is given the vision of the Grail that he has been seeking all his life. And the land is once again restored to fertility, like in our first story. If you want others to be happy, the Dalai Lama, one of my heroes, tells us to practice compassion. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. And if you want yourself to be happy, practice compassion. It's a win-win. I think I've probably gone longer than I was asked to, but thank you so much for sticking with me. Okay? Thank you. Look, I can barely reach. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yes, definitely. Definitely. Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. Well, I was informed that I get to lead the closing, so I will do a little bit of what I used to do when I was the ministerial guide. I'd like to thank all of the spirits who have been with us today, guarding us, guiding us, holding us, healing us. Thank you, spirits, one and all. If you wish to stay with us as we go through our day on this Easter Sunday, I can bet that you'd be very, very welcome. And as always, if you have your own concerns that you need to look to, when you go to look to those concerns, know that you go with our love and, as always, our gratitude. Please say with me, if you would like, phrase by phrase, a little closing benediction that sometimes we close our shamanic circles with. The sun is a circle. The sun is a circle. The moon is a circle. The moon is a circle. The earth is a circle. The earth is a circle. And we are a circle. And we are a circle. Everything that is alive. Everything that is alive. And everything has a place on the circle. And everything has a place on the circle. Ho! Ho! Thank you. Thank you for coming.